The turtle moves.
Please, help us save
If you've been following World Turtles for a while, thanks for being part of the journey. If this is your first encounter, welcome. My name is Gideon. I started making my first game as a hobby at the age of 40 and published it into early access 3.5 years later with the help of a publisher. I'll present some of my thoughts on the whole publishing process, what happened on the Steam platform before and around launch time, some weird incidents, what's been happening since the launch, and my future plans with World Turtles and game development overall. While I'm not allowed to disclose all information, I'll also discuss my experience with the publisher. But let's jump into the part which I expect everyone's here for, the sales numbers. Freedom Games and I released World Turtles into early access on the 1st of May 2023. It appeared on over 32,000 Steam wishlists at the time, which I was quite excited about. Unfortunately, sales turned out to be rather disappointing, given we've gone way past my original goal of 10,000 wishlists, which seemed like a pipe dream for so long, until it suddenly didn't. More on this later. The game's price was set at $20 and we launched with a 20% discount, with frequent discounts thereafter, rising to 30% eventually. $15 may have turned out to be a better price in terms of total revenue, but can't know what would have happened. In the first week, we sold about 1,200 units after taking returns into account. For the most part, I'm not going to talk about retail activations. While some of them are definitely legitimate sales from other platforms selling keys as arranged by the publisher, many are free keys distributed for review, content creators, etc. We also launched on GOG, Epic and other smaller stores, but the combined sales there are just under 10% of Steam sales, so maybe just keep that in mind as an overall adjustment. Note that about 6% of the revenue was from Linux and Mac users, which is more than I'd expected given what people have always been telling me. While I do not have Linux and Mac testing capabilities myself, I did spend some time with some very friendly and knowledgeable volunteer testers to make sure the most frequent issues were catered for, where possible. For the most part, it consisted of shader issues and could be sorted out by me including all the required variants and the players launching the game with the correct runtime parameters. During this time, wishlists also continued to climb due to Steam exposure, peaking a whisker under 40,000, while followers reached almost 5,000. I'll expand on this graph near the end of the video. In terms of regions, the USA was my greatest supporter with 41% of units sold, followed by Germany and the UK with 11% each. The game has been localized into German, Simplified Chinese and Afrikaans, my home language, which account for the German and Chinese support. Also, I'm from South Africa, so although not a huge number, there was some support from home. The gross Steam revenue for the first week was just over $21,000, but after returns, chargebacks and taxes, that was just over $17,000 net, and after Steam's 30% cut, only about $12,000 came to me in Freedom Games. I can't go into the revenue share information, but I'll discuss the publisher side in a bit more detail later on. On top of all these deductions from the $21,000, there's also South Africa's income tax to account for, which is calculated on a sliding scale between 18% and 45% on taxable income, depending on total income for the year. Also, I do have a company set up for my grown-up world consulting business and run all my game development business through the same company, so there's some relief in terms of tax-deductible expenses. Finally, I've actually taken a rather long break from my consultancy work for a while, so my income for this specific year is quite low, which luckily means taxes are also quite low. Taking all of this into account, I estimate my tax payable on this income to be about 25%, given my particular situation for this particular year. Either way, my income from game development is way less than my grown-up job could provide, but I have no regrets sacrificing some income in exchange for spending time on something I love doing a whole lot more. I'm just grateful that I'm in a situation where I actually do have that option available. Let's quickly see how the picture changed for the full 6 months. The sales numbers for the remainder of the 6 months was slightly more than that of the first week, so just about a copy of everything we've talked about up to now. Overall, taking returns into account, we've sold just under 2,500 copies on Steam in 6 months, for a total net Steam revenue of about $34,000. Taking all the other stores into account, Freedom and I have received total revenue of $26,300. To put this into perspective, I've had a look at estimated revenue of games on VG Insights, which has loads of insightful information on games. You can see here that games that earn a total of over $50,000 are estimated to be in the top 15% of earners. 72% of games sadly don't make it past $5,000. It's a difficult industry to make a reasonable amount of money from, with revenue highly skewed towards the few big winners. As things are going, I should hit 50,000 gross revenue about 10 months after early access launch, which puts World Turtles, the first game I've ever worked on, admittedly for 4 years now, comfortably in the top 15% of earners. That is very encouraging for the future, yet that doesn't bring me close to supporting my 4 kids financially yet. While I could have made a lot more money doing something else with my time, I would still have done this if I knew the outcome. I may not be able to make enough money from game development for the foreseeable future, but I'm in the fortunate situation of working for myself with a sufficiently lucrative, well-established consultancy, able to still spend more than half of my time on game development. Hopefully I can keep increasing my revenue over the short to medium term and keep increasing the percentage of my expenses I can cover with my game dev income. For now, I'll definitely keep trying, as I love learning and understanding more and more of the technicalities and skills. Now for something weird that happened along the way. One day I suddenly had 22 sales in China in just over an hour's time. Rather than being my big break, that was it. And the next day 22 returns suddenly appeared. This increased my returns rate to the current 11.8%, while it should technically be 11.2%. Let's discuss the publisher, Freedom Games. I know many developers and others in the industry sometimes are very negative about publishers, and I guess some publishers deserve it. However, overall I'm very happy that I went with Freedom Games. We found each other about 9 months before my eventual early access launch, which would have happened 6 months sooner if I didn't go into a partnership with them. I would have released a much worse game, a lot less polished, and it would probably have flopped quite badly. However, for various reasons, some of which I can't talk about, this relationship was definitely the best thing for me and World Turtles, even though seeing them take their cut each month from the meager earnings isn't the best feeling in the world. I know that I'd have been in a worse situation without them, and not just financially. I'd never been through the publishing process before, and their experience and assistance on many fronts, as well as the additional time I now had to work on the game, have allowed me to learn a whole lot more, and offer a much better game than my first attempt would have provided on my own. If I wasn't in it for the long haul, crashing and burning earlier may have been good, but I really would like to give this a go for a good number of years, and learning as much as I can in as little time as possible is worth a lot to an old crook like me. Finally, I thought I'd include some information around the wishlist build-up and Steam launch itself. My aim had always been to get to 10,000 wishlists before early access launch, in order to make it onto Steam's popular upcoming list for the extra exposure. Even though you can make it with around 7,000 wishlists, depending on the market at the time, I wanted to be well clear. It took me 14 months to crawl up to 4,000 wishlists. Then I suddenly jumped to over 13,000 in about 4 months. This was mainly due to appearing in the Earth Appreciation Festival, the Tiny Teams Festival, and Steam's Next Fest, back when you could still appear once a year. After teaming up with Freedom Games, we kept increasing that number. From my experience with World Turtles and other games over this period, I almost want to say that the only 3 big factors that really count are events with Steam front page coverage, really large content creators or gaming media, and Steam's discovery queue. While some content creators covered World Turtles, and it even appeared in quite a few top 10 list style videos, I never really hit it big on the video front. I did appear in PC Gamer twice, which probably added about 1,000 wishlists over a stretch of time. I also never made it onto a strong discovery queue run, but the front page featuring now and then, another Earth Appreciation Festival, and links from successful games Freedom had already published kept growing wishlists and followers, up to about 28,000 before it became time for popular upcoming. Our launch date turned out to be well chosen. Due to the lack of large games being launched in the days before World Turtles, it appeared on the front page of Popular Upcoming for 4 entire days, which increased the number of wishlists to well over 32,000. As already discussed, sales turned out to be rather disappointing, but I am hoping 1.0 launch goes better. I have already improved the game drastically in the last 8 months and plan to work on it until at least April or May this year, before full launch. I am focusing on the areas with the most negative feedback and hope to have a much more engaging game to offer by then, with the turtle playing more and more of an active role in the gameplay. After all,
Declonian mobile! The turtle moves!
Declonian mobile!